español o en inglés de las
This
diapositivas.
conference is
En la
being
parte
recorded. Only the main
superior, en la
conference is
ventana de
recorded.
Zoom, puede usted hacer clic en las opciones de Ver View, que se encuentra a la derecha de la barra verde. Seleccione diapositivas en español o English Slides, dependiendo de su preferencia. Si está usted en Zoom Workspace, esto aparecerá como dos lengüetas en la parte superior de su ventana de Zoom. Y usted puede ya activar vamos a iniciar la función de interpretación para que elijan su idioma e iniciaremos con la grabación. Gracias.
Well, thank you for taking the time to join us this evening again. This is our 9th listening session, and we have already learned so much from all of these sessions. So thanks again for being here. The agenda for our time together is split between a CARB presentation and opportunities to hear from you all. The CARB presentation includes the same information that we shared at our last workshop and at our previous listening sessions. The purpose of the presentation is to provide the nuts and bolts of the potential regulation and to highlight what we see as the benefits, opportunities, and challenges associated with the regulation. We also want to share where we are in the rulemaking process. Then we'll pause to hear clarifying questions, and then we'll facilitate a structured listening session that's based on questions that CARB staff have prepared. There will also be an opportunity to continue the discussion in smaller breakout groups. We really want to hear from you, your experiences, hopes, concerns, and ideas about how the regulation could be better designed or be better implemented. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to submit your questions using the Q&A feature. We will not accept verbal questions during the clarifying Q&A pause, so please make sure you submit your questions in writing using that Zoom feature, and we will get them answered at that point. So first, some background on the California Air Resources Board. CARB is part of the California Environmental Protection Agency, and our mission is to promote health, welfare, and ecological resources through the effective reduction of air pollutants. You may have heard about some of our other regulations. Many of them are related to vehicle emissions, but CARB also regulates other sectors, including toxics, locomotives, port and harbor emissions, and we work with the air districts to meet health-based air quality standards. In 2006, CARB became the lead agency for climate change policy and planning in California. So we're targeting heating equipment for a few main reasons. First, direct emissions from polluting space and water heaters are responsible for about 8% of total statewide climate pollutants, which presents a real opportunity to reduce a significant amount of California's greenhouse gas emissions. Second, space and water heaters also emit air pollutants such as nitrogen oxides or NOx and particulate matter, which worsen local air quality and impact public health. 2 California air districts in the Bay Area and in Southern California have adopted or proposed zero NOx rules for space and water heaters to improve air quality and reduce rates of respiratory and heart disease. Third, heat pumps used for space heating increase access to cooling in homes and businesses that previously didn't have air conditioning, because heat pumps can both heat and cool spaces. This increased added cooling is going to be important during the more frequent and more extreme heat events that our state experiences. And lastly, the regulation also provides a market signal by providing certainty and statewide consistency to manufacturers, consumers, and contractors, which can help to drive innovation and market adoption. Current concept would require that all new space and water heating equipment that's sold in California emit no greenhouse gases. As a point of sale requirement, that means that folks can continue using, maintaining, and repairing their current space and water heater equipment until its end of life. But once it comes time to replace the equipment, and if the regulation is in effect at the time of the replacement, the only new equipment that would be available for sale would be zero-emission equipment. The regulation is envisioned to focus on manufacturers, distributors, and retailers, not necessarily on individual residents, small businesses, or building owners. So now on to the details of the proposed regulation. An important element of the regulatory design is defining the equipment that's going to be regulated. For water heating, CARB is considering boilers and water heaters, instantaneous water heaters, which are also called on-demand or always-on water heaters, high-temperature boilers and water heaters, which are typically found in commercial applications like dry cleaners, and pool and spa heaters. For space heating, we are considering furnaces. These different types of equipment are then broken down into size categories, with smaller sized equipment typically serving smaller buildings. For example, we plan to regulate water heaters and boilers less than 75,000 BTUs per hour, which are typically storage water heaters between 20 and 100 gallons that you'd find in small buildings like single-family homes or small businesses, or used as in-unit water heaters in an apartment building in a multifamily building. There are 3 size buckets for the water heaters and boilers, with the largest regulated equipment being less than 2 million BTUs per hour. Instantaneous water heaters are split between large and small as well, while the high temperature water heaters under 2 million BTUs per hour are all regulated under the same size bucket. Pool heaters are also included, and the threshold we've set here, under 2 million BTUs per hour, includes most of the residential and commercial pool, spa, and hot tub heaters. For space heating, CARB is considering furnaces that are less than 175 kBTUs per hour, as well as furnaces that are less than or equal to 2 million BTUs per hour. The smaller capacity bucket includes mostly residential or small commercial space heating equipment, like floor or wall furnaces and central furnaces that you'd find in homes and buildings less than 3,000 square feet. The larger furnaces are typically used for large residential, multifamily, or commercial buildings. Reason for considering equipment between different end uses and then across different thresholds has to do with how soon we estimate this equipment to be readily available at a reasonable cost and with a suitable variety of options. CARB's proposed staggered compliance dates are visible in this table. We've tried to align our dates as closely as possible with the dates in the South Coast and Bay Area zero NOx rules that are either proposed or adopted in those 2 air districts. Because those rules apply to many, although not all, of the same types of equipment that CARB is planning to regulate. This alignment is intended to provide statewide consistency to the regulated parties. As you can see, the earliest compliance date is 2027 for the smaller water heaters, with the more specialized high-temperature water heaters having the latest compliance date in 2033. So that chart of equipment types based on the BTU per hour threshold can be kind of hard to visualize. So this slide is intended to help show the equipment that CARB plans to regulate. On the left side are images of equipment types that emit climate pollutants, like wall furnaces or natural gas tanked water heaters, often found in homes or businesses. This regulation is technology neutral. There are different zero-emission technologies available now, including electric resistance, heat pumps, and solar appliances. Fuel cell-based equipment is another potential option that might be available in the future. CARB staff anticipates that, for the most part, heat pumps will replace the polluting appliances, and heat pumps are available today for a variety of space and water heating applications. There are some real benefits associated with using heat pumps. For example, heat pumps use about a quarter of the energy that to heat spaces than conventional equipment. And a lot of promising heat pump technologies are becoming more widely available. There are heat pumps that work in both ducted and ductless heating systems. There are heat pumps specifically designed to work in cold climates, all the way down to 5 degrees Fahrenheit. And also encouraging is the development of the 120-volt heat pump water heater, which reduces the need for upsizing the electric panel because it utilizes a standard electrical outlet compared to most heat pump water heaters, which require a 240-volt circuit. We're still developing the regulation and plan to take our proposal to the board for consideration in 2025 with a final rule in 2026. While our public workshops are still our main venue for sharing new information and for hearing public comment, we are also in the midst of our public engagement work, which includes listening sessions just like this one. This slide illustrates some typical questions that may arise on the journey to replacing space and water heating equipment. Questions such as, how much does the new equipment cost? Can I find a knowledgeable contractor? Will I need any retrofits to install zero-emission equipment? Is my local energy distribution system ready? Will my energy bills change? If you have any other questions that you think are missing from this slide, please let us know. We'd love to hear from you. This picture looks different for renters, people both renting a home or renting a space for a business, where landlords are responsible for ensuring adequate space and water heating, and where many renters are already cost burdened. These common questions, the challenges they represent, and some of the possibilities available to address them today have all been reiterated through the listening sessions we've attended thus far. We're here to learn from your experiences and also to learn about what could be most helpful for you and others in California as we consider moving forward with this regulation. Zero-emission equipment is still often more expensive at purchase than air-polluting heating equipment. Fortunately, there are many programs encouraging people to adopt zero-emission equipment, many of them through incentives and rebates. So just to call a few out, the TECH program offers incentives for heat pump water heaters and space heaters with a higher amount for low-income households. Incentives are focused on investor-owned utility territories. The Equitable Building Decarb program targets low-income households and households in disadvantaged communities and includes zero-emission heat pump installation and covers the cost of pre-decarbonization retrofit needs, such as a panel upgrade, as well as including remediation for mold, asbestos, lead, and other healthy home needs. The California Energy Commission recently announced their program administrators, so these funds should be rolling out soon. In Central California, the administrator is the Center for Sustainable Energy. Investor-owned and publicly owned utilities also have a variety of different offerings, and regional energy networks also provide public benefit energy programs. And some irrigation districts in Central California, like the Modesto or Turlock irrigation districts, also offer rebates. One particularly helpful resource is the Switches On incentive finder, where you can plug in your zip code and then see a list of incentives that are available in your area. We've also heard that it can be challenging to find contractors who are knowledgeable about installing zero-emission equipment. Although technologies like heat pumps for heating are quite common in other parts of the country, they're still under 10% of installed heating equipment here in California. The TECH program is one example of a statewide incentive program that's focused on expanding and supporting contractors. The Clean Energy Connection provides a database of contractors so the public can know how to access qualified and knowledgeable contractors. Some buildings that don't currently have zero-emission space and water heating may need changes to accommodate new equipment. This can mean changing the equipment location or adding ventilation by installing louver doors on an existing water heater closet. If a zero-emission heater uses electricity, the electric service panel might need upsizing if it's smaller than 100 amps. If someone's not expecting their equipment to fail, getting a replacement could be delayed until these retrofits happen. Some possibilities for addressing these issues include low voltage and portable equipment options that can be a temporary or even permanent solution for buildings without sufficient space or needing increased electric service capacity. There are also loaner or rental programs for non-zero emission equipment or 120 volt heat pump water heaters that can be used until necessary retrofits can happen. Devices like smart service panels can help make the most of lower service panel capacity by managing the amount of power demanded by appliances in the house at any given time. You need to increase the size of your electric service panel to install zero emission equipment. There's also a utility side to this upsizing, which can come with significant cost and delay. The CPUC's staff recently proposed lower cost utility service upgrades for low income households. This would apply to CPUC jurisdiction utilities, including PG&E, but not other publicly owned utilities. Some areas of the state also experience frequent or prolonged outages, which can be especially hazardous in the winter. The CPUC is also working to reduce time to prepare distribution infrastructure to connect more energy resources and energy loads to the grid. During our discussion, we welcome any experiences you've had with distribution grid issues, outages, and any opportunities you've seen for addressing these potential challenges. One key question you might be wondering is if and how your energy bills will change. Time of use rates, which are now default for most Californians, are based on the time you're using energy. So electricity is more expensive when demand is high, but renewable generation is low. Some utilities like PG&E also offer specific rate plans for households that have heat pump space or water heaters or electric vehicles. Some technology can support keeping energy bills affordable, like smart water heaters that are programmed to turn on when energy is the least expensive, or devices like smart thermostats, which can help consumers avoid using energy when it's most expensive. Electricity currently is more expensive than gas on a per unit basis. However, zero-emission appliances like heat pumps can be much more efficient. So by switching to heat pumps, bills can be reduced. This may not be the case, however, if switching to electric resistance technology, which uses more electricity. And things may look different for folks using propane or wood burning as their main heating fuel. Finally, insulation can have a big impact on energy bills, so ensuring buildings are well insulated can help reduce energy costs. Another concern we've heard is what a potential regulation means for renters. We recognize the concern that landlords could pass through the cost of expensive zero-emission equipment onto their tenants. Some jurisdictions, like in LA, for example, do cap these pass-through costs, but most do not. The map on the right shows an inventory of anti-displacement policies in the Bay Area, compiled by the Urban Displacement Project in 2019. CARB has commissioned an update and statewide expansion of this map so the public can see which cities and counties have what kinds of protective policies available. While there are statewide renter protection laws in place, exemptions exist for substantial retrofits that may put tenants at risk of losing housing when a major renovation needs to take place. Some incentive programs like the CEC's Equitable Building DCARB program offer protections for tenants. So if a landlord accesses that program, they're prohibited from raising rents or evicting their tenants. CARB recognizes the critical need to mitigate the risk that a zero-emission regulation could serve as the basis for a landlord to raise rents or to seek to evict their tenants. And that wraps up the presentation part of the evening. So we welcome your feedback and thoughts on all of these issues that I've presented, and on any questions that you have about the regulation, the details of the regulation. And I'll now pass it to my colleague, Allison, to share some responses to the questions, if we have any that have come in so far.
Great. Thank you, Maggie, for the presentation, and to those of you who have already submitted questions via the Q&A feature. We're going to address any clarifying questions first, and we may not be able to get to every question in the queue right now, but we will follow up after the meeting with responses to those questions to those who raised them. Okay, so one question that has come in is, will there be exemptions for rural areas that lack reliable access to electricity? Last year, many residents in my district were without power for 14 days during a snowstorm. For many elderly residents, propane is their sole source of heat. Yeah, so thank you so much for raising this question. We are collaborating with other state agencies, such as the California Public Utilities Commission, to evaluate the implications of this standard for electrical grid infrastructure needs. And specifically to your question about propane, whether the standards would apply to propane fueled units is still something that we're exploring, and we really welcome your input and further experiences or feedback with propane or living in more rural areas during the discussion portion of this call. Okay. Moving to the next question. We have, for space heating, are there any incentives to use carbon dioxide R744 as a refrigerant? And what is the timeline for global warming potential limits on refrigerants? So our understanding is that these refrigerants, the carbon dioxide refrigerants, are still somewhat cost prohibitive and have technical challenges requiring higher pressures for residential equipment. That being said, there is a separate section within the Air Resources Board that works on regulating refrigerants. So those sorts of incentives wouldn't be covered under this regulation, but we would be happy to put you in touch with the group working on those regulations. Okay, and then another question that we've received is, why are we changing from the more efficient natural gas? It's cheaper and less damaging to climate than production and maintenance of wind and solar products. It is irresponsible not to figure in the environmental costs of production of clean energy. So like Maggie was saying earlier in the presentation, we're pursuing this regulation to help meet California's climate goals and reduce air pollution. We will be exploring the environmental implications of the regulation through CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. I'm not seeing any additional questions at this time. Maybe we can pause for just a few moments to see if any more come in. Okay, well, maybe with those questions addressed, I will pass things to Emma for our facilitated discussion.
Thanks so much, Allison, for covering the questions that we received from folks registering for the listening session tonight. The Q&A feature is still open, so if if other questions arise, please feel free to add them there. So now I'll introduce the next portion of our agenda where we'll have a facilitated discussion. So this meeting tonight is structured a little differently than our typical workshops, which often happen during 9 to 5 working hours. We're holding this meeting in the evening to make it possible for those to attend for whom this topic isn't necessarily connected to their professional work and might have personal interest. So I'll give an overview of how the discussion will work on the next slide. So we wrote these 5 discussion questions, which cover your personal experiences, your thoughts about the potential regulation, your ideas about implementation in terms of what could help make a switch smoother. We also want to ask an open-ended question if there's anything else you'd like to bring to the conversation tonight. And then our 5th question is related to what or who might be missing from the conversation so far and how we might be able to include them. So for our facilitated discussion, we'll be using a tool called Menti, which I'll explain in more detail on the next slide. Menti will collect responses in writing first. And after we've had a moment to see your responses in writing, participants are invited to add verbal comments via Zoom. So to verbally respond to a question, you can use the raise hand feature in Zoom. That'll be located under the React button, which looks like a little heart for some, or it'll look like a raised hand button. Since we do have a slightly smaller group tonight, we're going to expand the limit, the time limit here from 2 until 3 minutes. And I also want to encourage folks in the time you have, please feel free to share information about your professional or personal background, what draws you to this topic, where you're coming from. We're interested in hearing that as well. You will see a timer on screen and you'll hear a little musical cue reminiscent of an award ceremony to let you know that your time is up. We have about 5 to 15 minutes allotted for each of these questions. And following the structured discussion based on these questions, we also have breakout rooms available. So if you have further thoughts you want to share or just time to be in more informal dialogue with CARB staff and other participants in the meeting, you're warmly encouraged to stay for a breakout room, even if you don't have something quite on your mind that you want to share and just want to jump in to participate in the discussion. Please feel welcome to do that. Okay, so now I'll explain how to use Menti. So if you wish to just use your smartphone to participate in the Menti poll, you can just open up your camera and point it at the QR code visible on screen, and that'll take you right to the Menti page. If you want to work from a browser, you can follow the link that was just shared in the chat or type in www.menti.com and the code 95583721. If you don't want to answer a question, you'll just have to hit submit and then skip to go to the next. Oh, sorry, can we go back one slide, please? Great. And you can use the back button on your browser to go back a question, and these questions will remain open for an hour until after the meeting ends. Okay, so as folks are getting into Menti, I just want to invite the other CARB staff on the call who haven't had a chance to introduce themselves yet to say a quick hello, just so you're familiar with who else is here and listening gratefully to your comments.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. This is Dana Papke-Waters with CARB.
Hi, everyone. This is Kathy Zhao. Thank you for joining us here. Hi, this is Melanie Zauscher. Thanks for your time tonight.
Good evening. My name is Holger Stun with CARB. Thank you for coming.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Ballin. I'm with Sacramento State supporting CARB.
Hi, my name is Naseem Golestani, CARB staff. Nice to see you all.
Hi, good evening. I'm Pamela Gupta. I'm also with CARB and look forward to the discussion. Thanks for joining.
And hi, I'm Sam Lerman with CARB, and just excited to be part of the discussion tonight.
Wonderful. Thanks everybody for sharing your introduction. So I think we're now ready to stop the screen shares, both English and Spanish, and Lisa will pull up our Menti poll results. Okay, great. So we have, our first question is just a warm up. We're curious where folks are coming from geographically. This is the Central California listening session. California is a really huge state, so if you don't mind sharing the city or county that you live in, just so we have a better sense of who's here. So a couple responses, Sacramento, Santa Cruz, and I'll leave another few seconds for folks to add their locations in the Menti poll. Fresno, great. Okay, I think we can go on to the next question, which is just a little bit more about your backgrounds. Trying to understand your professional field of work. So folks are here from building decarbonization, environmental nonprofit, CCA customer programs, and I'll just leave another couple seconds for anybody who wants to share about their background to do so. Okay, I think then we can move on to our first discussion question for the evening. Thanks so much to those of you who have already added your responses in writing here. Our first question is about your experiences with space and water heating equipment replacement. So the first comment here says, I've always rented, so I've never experienced space or water heating replacements. I'd love to replace my gas-powered furnace with a heat pump. And another comment, as a renter, I've lived in units where both space and water heating equipment has been replaced during my rental period. My experience has varied depending on the landlord. Great, thanks for sharing those initial comments. Now I'd like to go ahead and open it up for folks to either add to what they've written here in the Menti verbally or share something new to add to this conversation about your experiences with space and water heating equipment replacement. I'm curious if the person who left the comment here about their experience varying depending on the landlord, if you might be willing to share a little bit more about how your experience varied. Okay, I see Kayla Robinson has her hand raised, so I'll go ahead and ask you to unmute. Kayla, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. I've lived in, rental units where when my heater broke, for example, the landlord was pretty reticent to do any major adjustments and the heater was pretty old. And it left me feeling pretty uncomfortable with the situation because I think you feel in a bit of a lurch and you're feel pretty vulnerable to the landlord to actually decide how they're going to make those changes. And in my situation, we actually didn't have central air conditioning in Sacramento. And so I was pretty unsure if they were going to go ahead and try and replace the whole unit or just do the heater. And so it was pretty stressful in the sense of if they did want to completely redo everything, would I have to move out temporarily, or would my rent go up? Because if we didn't have air conditioning and they decided to pursue something like I felt very it felt very out of my control in terms of like the way that the landlord wanted to make changes. I feel like in the other situation, it was water heating, and I have since moved to a space where the landlord is just I don't know, more involved person. And so she was, on top of it and very quick to address problems. I don't think she was really thinking, oh, natural gas versus electric, but just way more, hands-on and kind of telling us everything's going to be okay. Don't worry, we're going to get this resolved. And so I feel as a renter very vulnerable to the landlord and sort of the decisions that they make. And, I feel very lucky that, there were places I could have gone if it got too cold in my unit. But I just imagine if you're electrifying a home, just thinking about how that might impact a renter and who doesn't have somewhere else to go. And in my case, it was winter and, our heater had broke. So it was pretty cold.
Well, thank you, Kayla, so much for being willing to share more about your experience. I know that going through this is personal, so just really appreciate your willingness to share more, and appreciate your comment a lot. So thank you. Anybody else here on the line who feels inspired to share more in response to this first question? All right. Well, let's go ahead and move on to the second question then. So we asked here, what should CARB staff bear in mind as they design a regulation and plan for potential implementation? So as you saw, Maggie presented the different technology types and timelines that we're thinking about implementing a zero emission standard. And we're of course really interested in hearing feedback from the public about this regulation proposal and certain elements you think we should consider as we continue to refine the design. So we have one comment insofar, rental protections, large multifamily project logistics, coordinating with utilities on service upgrades. Yes, this comment hit on a number of important issues that our team is exploring. So thank you for adding that here. So please continue to add more in writing via Menti. But I'd like to ask if the person who shared this comment in writing here also might be willing to raise their hand and come off mute so we can hear more about their perspective on these topics. Or any others on the call who'd like to chime in here. Okay. Well, let's go ahead on to question number 3. Always happy to return here if thoughts bubble up later in the conversation. So any ideas around what could help make a switch to zero emission space and water heating smoother for you, your neighbors, and your communities? So here we're seeking ideas related to implementation broadly, but even drawing on your past experiences. What might have made the process smoother what should CARB be thinking about as we're planning for potentially implementing these rules? I'll just share a very most gentle, friendly nudge. Even if you thought you were joining this call just to listen, we are all humans living or working in buildings with space and water heating, and your perspectives are really valued. There's CARB staff are here to listen to whatever you want to share. Your thoughts do not have to be perfectly fully formed. So please feel most warmly encouraged to jump into the conversation. And if this format isn't feeling quite right for you, we'll have the breakout room space available later as well. All right, well, let's move on to question number 4. So very similar to question number 3, there's nothing that folks wish to share with CARB staff in addition to the questions that we've raised so far. So I just want to hold some space here again for verbal comments. Please don't hesitate to raise your hand or type a response here in the Menti. This is a listening session. We're here to listen to you. That's our primary goal. Of course, that requires that you're open to speaking up and sharing with us. So warm encouragement to raise your hand to share your perspective with our team. So we have a question coming in here. If a landlord chooses not to comply with the regulation and goes outside of California to buy a cheaper gas-powered technology, would the renter be liable for the landlord? Yes, thank you for this question. Right now, our intention is to enforce the regulation at the manufacturer, distributor, or retailer level. So on-site property inspections, our staff is not currently imagining as part of the enforcement plan for this regulation. So I don't have a more detailed question for you at this time, but we will make sure that the enforcement and legal teams at CARB see this question and we can provide a more detailed response in the future. Okay, I'm hearing that somebody was having trouble with the Menti tool, but would like to provide a comment. So Brenda, well, I'll ask you to go ahead and unmute here, and I'm so sorry for the technical challenges. Okay.
Hello?
Hi, Brenda. Okay, yes, we can hear you.
Oh, thank you so much. I don't know what was going on. It just kept me stuck on the first question, but I'm Brenda Estrada-Diaz, and I'm with the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District. I know that you briefly touched on this earlier in regards to a previous question, but first of all, the district appreciates the presentation that you guys are providing, and we definitely support the developments of building decarbonization strategies, which would help areas such as the San Joaquin Valley in reaching their attainment goals. We would like to highlight the importance of recognizing the needs of rural and other communities in developing an equitable and feasible approach for technology transitions. Specifically, CARB should more closely analyze impacts to rural communities that use propane devices. And then in addition to that, as building electrification requirements pose potential significant impacts to low-income residents, we ask for careful equity considerations that must be taken into account as new measures are developed, particularly in areas such as the Valley, which is the home to some of the most disadvantaged communities in the state. The district looks forward to collaborating with CARB through the Technical Advisory Committee for equitable electrification of existing buildings and through ongoing public workshops. But I just wanted to provide that feedback in response to your question to number 2.
Thank you so much, Brenda. And my apologies for the challenges with Menti. So I'm glad you were able to share your comment with us verbally. So just reflecting 2 of the pieces that I heard from you around a thorough analysis of propane users, as well as thinking about low-income residents and communities in the Central Valley as a focus of our equity analysis. So thank you also for participating in the advisory committee for the UCLA Equitable Electrification Project. We really appreciate your sharing your expertise in that group. In terms of the propane research, my colleague Nassim is managing a contract that's looking precisely into propane use and potential for decarbonization in the state. So we'd be happy to include you in sharing more information about what that research contract will cover. In terms of our equity analysis work, we are really interested in bringing in factors such as household income when we're looking at the potential costs of our regulation, being able to think about the relative affordability of expenses associated with adopting zero-emission equipment, because we really do recognize that households live in really different conditions with different incomes across the state, and we can't look at statewide averages alone when we think about potential impacts. So it's really wonderful to have you on the call, Brenda. It's great to meet you, and thank you so much for participating in tonight's listening session.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it's perhaps some other folks were getting stuck in different pages of the Menti. So please use if you're having trouble accessing, you can send us a message via the Q&A feature, or you can just simply raise your hand in Zoom and we'll make sure we can get to your comment. Okay, seeing no more on question 4, let's go ahead to question number 5. Yes, who is missing from the conversation? How can we include them? Most people. Yes, frankly, tonight I'm feeling a sense of, you know, our last listening session, which had a similar format, felt effective in terms of creating a space to receive written feedback and verbal comments. Of course, you know, California is not a one-size-fits-all place. So I think I'm learning in real time what, or questions are coming up around what's a format that could be supportive. So, you know, I really welcome folks on the call tonight who might be having feedback or ideas about tonight's session and the conversation being relatively quiet. If there's any feedback you want to offer us now or later in terms of how we can create an event that will reach more people more effectively. Okay, well, we can all continue to mull that one over. really appreciate those that are still here with us. So I think we can go ahead and move into the next portion of our agenda. So next we'll be splitting up into breakout groups. Spanish speakers, oh, Holger, would you mind starting the English slide share once more? Thanks. Okay, so you can go on to the next slide. So next up, we'll have our optional breakout rooms for the rest of the time remaining this evening. We're scheduled until 8. Of course, you don't need to stay for the whole time we have allotted. And if you aren't planning to stay for the breakout rooms, thank you so much for being here. There's a feedback form QR code here on the screen, which we'll ask you to fill out after tonight. So the breakout rooms are an informal opportunity to share more thoughts based on the discussion questions or any other comments you have in a small group. Please feel welcome to stay even if you don't have something on the tip of your tongue right now, if you want to just remain part of the conversation. And anybody who wishes to participate in Spanish should be in room 2, which will include our interpreter. So before we part for the breakout rooms, from which we won't return back to the main meeting, I just would like to share our sincere thanks for all of you taking the time to hear our presentation, share your comments. We really encourage you to stay involved in future public meetings. You can join our email listserv if you're not already a part of it, or reach out to us at buildingdecarb@arb.ca.gov. And that feedback form was just shared via the chat as well. Okay, so with that, I think we can go ahead and break out into our smaller discussions. Thank you so much, everyone.